Eli Drummond's horse stopped dead the moment he saw her. The blonde woman was lashed to the blackened rafters of a burned-out cabin, arms twisted above her head, her dress scorched where the words, "Apache Lover," had been burned into the fabric. Her head sagged, but when the wind shifted, she groaned. He swung down before his boots even touched the dirt in his mind, knife already out, cutting the first rope with a quick slice. The weight of her body dropped into his arms, lighter than it should have been, her skin cold through the torn cotton. "Don't," she tried to speak, but her voice cracked like dry wood. "Save your breath," Eli muttered, pulling the last knot free and lifting her down. She flinched hard when his hand brushed the welt on her shoulder. "Who did this?" he asked, scanning the tree line. No answer, just a shiver that ran through her whole frame. The horse snorted and shifted, ears twitching toward the trail. Someone was coming. Eli cursed under his breath and carried her to the creek bed, crouching behind a rock outcrop. The first sound he heard was boots, many of them crunching on charred boards. A man's voice carried on the cold air, sharp and angry. "If she's dead, leave her. If she's not, I'll kill her myself." The woman stiffened in his arms. Eli felt her pulse thudding against his wrist, too fast. "Why?" he whispered. Her eyes darted to his, pale blue and burning with something between terror and defiance. "I fed a baby," she said, almost like a confession. "Not just any baby," another voice called from the ruins. "An Apache brat she dragged into her own bed." The mob laughed, a harsh sound that made Eli's gut twist. He'd heard this kind of hate before, and he knew it didn't end with a laugh. He kept low, shifting them along the rocks until the sounds grew faint. When they reached his horse, he boosted her up without asking. "Where's the baby now?" She didn't answer, just stared ahead as if the trees might swallow her secret. He mounted behind her, his arms caging her in, and turned toward the high country where no posse would follow. "You're not telling me something," he said as they climbed. Her breath came fast. "I'll tell you when I know you won't hand him over." Eli's jaw clenched. Whoever this woman was, she was more trouble than he'd seen in a long time. But he wasn't about to let her hang twice. By the time Eli's cabin came into view, the woman's head had fallen against his chest, her breath shallow but steady. He pushed the door open with his boot, carried her inside, and laid her on the bed by the fire. She blinked awake, looking around like a cornered animal, eyes catching on the rifles lined along the wall. "You can rest," Eli said, pulling a blanket over her shoulders. "Nobody's finding you here." Her gaze flicked up, sharp. "They'll come. They always do." He crouched beside her, studying the cracked skin on her wrists where the ropes had bitten deep. "I've seen mobs before, but this wasn't about you. It was about whatever you're hiding." That's when she turned away, staring at the flames as though they were a different fire entirely. "3 nights ago," she whispered, "there was a raid. I don't know who started it. I just know when I found him, tiny, cold, screaming, he wasn't going to live another hour." Eli froze. "The Apache baby?" Her jaw tightened. "He's in the hills, safe. But they'll track me, and if they catch me, they'll find him." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a faint echo, hoofbeats, not from the main road but from the ridge above his land. Eli stood and peered through the narrow window slit, spotting 3 riders picking their way down the slope. The leader's coat was gray, patched at the elbow. Men Eli knew from the town's self-appointed defense committee. They were smiling. "How many know where you hid the boy?" Eli asked. She shook her head. "Just me. And one more." Her voice faltered. "And he's dead now." The hoofbeats grew louder. Eli pulled his Winchester from the wall and checked the chamber. "You want that boy to stay alive?" She nodded without hesitation. Then you'll tell me exactly where he is, because in about 2 minutes, those men will make sure neither of us get another chance. Her breath came fast, her lips trembling. Northridge, under the fallen pine. There's a blanket. The one you found me with. Wrap him in it and keep moving. Eli grabbed his coat, tossing another blanket toward her. You'll ride with me. She sat up, wincing. If they catch me. They won't, he cut her off. But if you're not there, I won't know if I've got the right child. Her eyes met his, a flash of trust fighting through the fear. Outside, the first rider's shadow crossed the yard. Eli kicked the door shut, the rifle steady in his hands. Time to go. Eli shoved the door open and moved fast, hauling her up behind him on the saddle just as the first rider rounded the corner of the barn. There, the man shouted, spurring his horse, the others closing in from both flanks. Eli didn't waste a bullet yet. He drove his heels into his gelding sides and shot towards the timberline, the mare's hooves tearing clumps of frost from the earth. The woman clung to him, her nails biting into his coat. If they catch us, she began, but her words were drowned by the crack of a rifle. Bark exploded from a pine trunk ahead as the shot missed them by inches. Eli ducked low, veering into a narrow draw where the slope was too steep for 3 abreast. The sound of pursuit echoed behind them, horses laboring, men swearing. You sure the boy's where you said? He growled over his shoulder. Yes, she gasped. But the pine, it's half buried in snow. You'll have to dig. Another shot whined past his ear. This time Eli yanked the Winchester from its scabbard, turned in the saddle, and fired once. The lead rider's hat flew off as his horse stumbled, buying them a few precious seconds. They broke from the draw into a clearing, the air colder, thinner. He could see the dark line of the North Ridge ahead, a jagged scar against the sky. Hold on, he told her, and she did, her arms tightening as the horse leapt a narrow creek. Hoofbeats still thundered behind them, but now another sound joined the chase. Howling. Not close, not yet, but enough to make the riders hesitate. Wolves, she murmured, and Eli knew she was right. Packs roamed this country when hunger drove them down from higher ground, and a commotion like this was an open invitation. They reached the fallen pine moments later, its trunk half buried in ice and drifted snow. Eli swung down, thrusting the reins into her hands. Stay on the horse. If they get close, ride for the ridge's far side. He dropped to his knees, scraping snow away until his fingers hit coarse wool. The blanket. His gut twisted. Inside was a bundle no bigger than a milk pail, still and silent. He pulled it close, unwrapping just enough to see a small, dark-eyed face, the skin warm under his fingers. Alive. Relief punched through him, but before he could wrap the boy again, a bullet smacked into the pine beside his head, spraying splinters. The riders had arrived. He yanked the blanket tight, vaulted back into the saddle, and turned the gelding toward the ridge trail. The howls were closer now, too close to tell if they were behind or ahead. Eli didn't slow as the ridge trail narrowed, his gelding's breath billowing in clouds ahead of them. The woman twisted to look back, her voice tight. They're still coming. He didn't need her to tell him. The pounding hooves and shouted curses were closing in. But louder still came the low, rolling growl from the trees ahead. A gray shape slipped across the path, then another, until 6 wolves stood in the snow, their coats bristling, eyes glinting in the pale light. The gelding skidded, snorting hard, nearly unseating them. Eli held the reins tight with one hand, cradling the bundled child in the other. The wolves fanned out, some moving low, others pacing just far enough to block escape. Behind them, the riders reined in, their laughter breaking the cold air. Looks like your luck just ran out, mountain man, one called, voice smug. Eli ignored him, assessing distance, terrain, and the feel of the gelding's trembling muscles beneath him. He'd fought wolves before, never with a baby in his arms and a half-frozen stranger behind him. The woman leaned close, her breath hitting his ear. They're watching the baby. They can smell him. He shifted in the saddle, sliding the Winchester free and handing her the reins. "Keep his head covered and don't drop him," he said. She swallowed hard, nodding. Eli fired a single shot into the snow in front of the lead wolf. It yelped and backed away, but the others only spread wider, testing the edges. The riders behind started forward, but one's horse spooked at the scent. Rearing so violently, the man tumbled into the drift. In that chaos, Eli made his move, turning the gelding toward the steep cut that ran down the ridge's side. "Hold on," he barked, and spurred the horse. The descent was near vertical, the snow deep, but momentum carried them through, spraying white in all directions. A wolf lunged from the side, snapping at the gelding's flank. Eli swung the rifle stock hard, connecting with a sickening thud that sent the animal sprawling. They hit the bottom of the cut in a rush, the sound of pursuit muffled now by the ridge itself. The woman's hands clutched his coat so tightly he could feel her nails through the fabric. "You still want to save that boy?" he asked between breaths. "I'd die for him," she shot back. "Good," Eli said, eyes scanning the narrow creek bed ahead. "Because we're not out of trouble yet." A shadow moved up ahead, bigger than a wolf, broader, standing still against the snow. The gelding slowed instinctively, hooves crunching through the thin ice of the creek bed as the shadow ahead took shape. It wasn't an animal. It was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a buffalo hide coat that made him look even larger, his black hair loose and glistening with frost. In his hand, a long bow rested casually at his side, but the arrow already notched told Eli this was no casual meeting. The man's dark eyes flicked from Eli to the bundle in the woman's arms, then back to Eli's face. "You came for him," the stranger said, voice deep and even, as if they'd been expecting each other. Eli's grip on the Winchester tightened. "You know the boy?" The man nodded once, slow. "He's Lakota, my sister's son. His mother was killed for refusing a white man's bed. I tracked him to the ones chasing you." The woman let out a shaky breath, relief and fear tangled in the sound. "Then you'll take him?" she asked. The Lakota man's gaze softened for only a moment before hardening again. "Not yet. They'll follow you, not me. You're the bait now." Behind them, faintly over the wind, came the echo of voices. The riders were finding their way down the ridge. Eli glanced at the woman. Her lips were blue, her fingers white around the baby. She wouldn't last long in this cold. "If you've got a plan, speak it fast," Eli said. The Lakota man pointed upstream. "Half a mile? There's an old beaver dam. Cross it, then turn north through the birches. They'll see your tracks and chase. I'll circle behind, take them out one by one." Eli didn't like being bait, but the man's tone carried the weight of someone who'd hunted men before. He gave a curt nod. "Don't miss," he said. The Lakota's eyes glinted. "I won't." Without another word, he vanished into the trees, silent as smoke. Eli urged the gelding upstream, ice cracking under their weight, water sloshing cold over the horse's fetlocks. The woman's arms tightened around the bundle as she whispered something in a language Eli didn't understand. Behind them, a distant shout turned into a chorus. The riders had caught sight of them. Snow sprayed as Eli pushed the gelding harder, the dam coming into view ahead, its frozen timbers slick and narrow. "We make this," Eli muttered, "and maybe we live to see morning." But as the gelding leapt onto the dam, a shot cracked from behind, and the wood beneath them shuddered. The gelding's front hooves hit the frozen logs, and for a heartbeat it seemed they'd make it across. Then another rifle cracked, the bullet splintering a support beam, and the whole structure lurched under their weight. Eli's gut clenched as the horse's hind legs slid, hooves scrambling for purchase on the slick, ice-coated wood. "Hold the baby high," he barked, lunging forward in the saddle to shift their weight. The woman clutched the child tight against her chest, her eyes wide with terror as the gelding let out a shrill, panicked whinny. The dam's surface buckled, logs rolling under the strain, and then the back half gave way entirely. Eli kicked free of the stirrups, yanking the woman and child toward him as they plunged sideways into the freezing water. The shock was instant, stabbing into every nerve, stealing his breath. He fought to keep his head above the swirling current, one arm wrapped around the woman, the other clamping the baby to his chest. The gelding thrashed nearby, eyes wild, trying to find footing on the broken timbers. Shouts rose from the far bank. The riders had reached the edge of the dam. "They're gonna shoot us in the water," the woman gasped, teeth chattering so violently the words barely formed. Eli scanned the bank upstream. Nothing but jagged ice and boulders. Downstream, the water narrowed between two high banks, and that's when he saw it, a dark overhang where the current undercut the bank, just big enough to hide them. "Kick for that ledge," he ordered, pulling her along with powerful strokes. Arrows hissed overhead, one striking the ice with a sharp crack. A bullet skipped across the surface, so close he felt the sting of spray on his cheek. They reached the overhang, ducking under into shadow, their bodies pressed against the muddy wall. The roar of the current muffled the world outside, but Eli could still make out the faint whistle, a sound not from the river. It came again, sharper this time, from the trees beyond the riders. Then the first scream split the air, high and panicked. The Lakota had begun his hunt. Eli shifted the woman so she could brace against the wall, his rifle now in his hands. "When they scatter, we move," he said quietly. The woman's eyes met his, still wild with cold and fear, but there was a glint there too. Hope. Above them, another scream tore through the night, followed by the thud of a body hitting snow. The trap was working, but Eli knew the next few minutes would decide if any of them lived to see daylight. Eli didn't wait for the third scream. The moment the gunfire on the bank turned into frantic shouts, he shoved the woman forward into the current, letting it carry them downstream toward a low, snow-covered bank. The baby whimpered against her chest, its tiny hands gripping her coat, and Eli's boots found purchase on the pebbled bottom just long enough to heave them out of the water. Steam curled off their soaked clothes in the frigid air. "Move," he hissed, shoving her toward the birch line. The sharp twang of a bowstring came from somewhere above, followed by a grunt and the heavy crash of a man hitting snow. Two riders bolted from the far side of the creek, their horses screaming in panic as the Lakota warrior emerged like a shadow from the trees, loosing another arrow before fading back into cover. Eli kept low, guiding the woman through the trees, every step a fight as their soaked boots sank into drifts. Behind them chaos erupted, men shouting to each other, trying to regroup, but each time a voice rose, it was cut short by a whistle and a sudden, final silence. A rider broke from the mess and spotted them, spurring his horse through the snow, rifle swinging up. Eli spun, bracing the Winchester against his shoulder. He fired once, the crack rolling through the valley. The rider toppled sideways, the horse veering and vanishing into the trees. The woman gasped, stumbling, but Eli caught her arm and kept her moving. "Not far," he told her, though his lungs burned with the lie. A shadow passed to their left, the Lakota keeping pace, eyes flicking to the child before returning to the path ahead. "Two left," he murmured, then was gone again. Eli's chest tightened. Every second counted. Through a break in the trees, the old trapper's cabin came into view, roof heavy with snow, smoke curling weakly from the chimney. He half pushed, half carried the woman across the last stretch, kicking open the door with his boot. Inside, warmth slammed into them, the fire low but alive. Eli shoved the door shut just as a gunshot punched into the wood, splintering it inches from the woman's head. She crouched by the hearth, clutching the baby, while Eli dropped to one knee beside the window, eyes scanning the tree line. The Lakota's whistle came again, sharp and final. Then, silence. No shouts, no hoofbeats, just the whisper of snow sliding from the cabin roof. Eli lowered his rifle but didn't let go. Somewhere out there, the last man was deciding whether to fight or flee. Either way, Eli knew this wasn't over, not yet. The silence held for barely half a minute before the crunch of boots on snow broke it. Eli's eyes cut to the door, every muscle tightening. Through a narrow gap in the shutters, he spotted the last pursuer, a broad-shouldered man in a tattered fur coat, face streaked with black ash, rifle in hand. He wasn't riding. He was walking, slow and steady, like a wolf testing a trap. The Lakota warrior appeared behind him, bow drawn, but the man suddenly dropped to one knee and fired without looking back. The arrow flew harmlessly into the snow as the Lakota dove for cover. Eli cursed under his breath. This one was clever. The woman huddled closer to the hearth, trying to muffle the baby's soft cries in her shawl. Eli shook his head. "Don't," he mouthed, holding up a hand. A single sound might give them away. The man outside circled toward the back, disappearing from view, and Eli motioned for the Lakota to cover the front while he moved to the rear window. He eased it open just enough to let the cold knife into the room. The snow beyond was undisturbed until a shadow passed across it. Eli fired, the crack shattering the quiet. The figure fell forward into the drift but then rolled, firing wildly toward the cabin. A bullet punched through the wall inches from Eli's hip. The Lakota burst from cover, charging low through the snow. Another arrow knocked. The man scrambled to his knees, swinging the rifle toward him, but Eli's second shot hit home, jerking the man back. He dropped, rifle half buried, steam rising from his body. The Lakota stood over him for a moment, then lifted his gaze to Eli and gave a single nod, a warrior's acknowledgement. Eli returned it. Inside, the woman finally let out the breath she'd been holding, shoulders shaking as the tension bled from her body. Eli shut the window and crossed to the hearth, squatting beside her. "They're gone," he said, voice low but certain. She stared at him, eyes searching for any trace of doubt. Finding none, she loosened her hold on the child just enough to let Eli see the little face, rosy now from the heat, breathing evenly. "Why would they come for us?" she asked, almost to herself. Eli's jaw tightened. "Not us," he said. "You." The Lakota stepped in from the cold, then, stamping snow from his boots. "They knew," he said in accented English. "That boy is not just hers." Eli's gaze flicked between them, the truth beginning to take shape in the shadows of the small cabin. Whatever they had just survived was only the start of something far bigger. The Lakota closed the door behind him, sealing out the wind, but not the weight of what he'd just said. The woman's hands tightened protectively around the baby, her knuckles white as bone. Eli moved closer to the fire, watching the warrior's face. "Then tell me," he said evenly, "before we're blindsided again." The Lakota knelt, resting his bow against the wall. "The child's father was one of ours," he said, his voice low but steady. "A chief's son. He was killed before the baby's birth. The men chasing you, they were from the band that murdered him. They believe if the child lives, he will grow to unite the fractured clans against them." Eli's mind worked fast. This was no simple rescue. This was the kind of blood feud that didn't end with a single night's fight. The woman's lips trembled. I didn't even know his father was—" She trailed off, staring into the flames as if the truth might burn away there. Outside, the wind shifted, and the distant howl of wolves carried over the drifts. Eli caught the Lakota's eye. "That sound mean what I think it means?" The warrior's jaw tightened. "Scouts. They've called more." He rose in one smooth motion, stringing another arrow. "They will not stop tonight." Eli checked his Winchester. 2 rounds left in the chamber, a handful more in his belt. Not enough for a siege. He crossed to the woman and knelt. "We're going to have to move again," he said, keeping his voice calm, though urgency pounded in his chest. "Stay close to me, and when I say run, you run." She nodded, eyes locked on his. Outside, movement flickered at the tree line, shadows slipping between trunks, low and fast. Eli's gut went cold. He turned to the Lakota. "We take the ridge behind the cabin. High ground buys us minutes." The warrior nodded once. The 3 of them slipped out the back, boots crunching in the crusted snow, the baby's small sounds muffled under layers of wool. They'd barely reached the slope when the first rifle cracked. Snow puffed up around their legs, the shot echoing like a warning. Eli spun, firing back, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. The Lakota's arrows sang through the cold, finding targets in the dark. But more shapes emerged, too many. Eli grabbed the woman's arm and pushed her ahead. "Go." The ridge loomed above, and with every step, he knew the fight was about to come to them, and there would be no more running. This was where they would stand. Snow swirled around them as they climbed, each breath cutting like shards of ice in their throats. Eli kept himself between the woman and the gunfire below, his Winchester barking when a shadow crested the lower slope. The Lakota moved like the wind itself, loosing arrows without pause, each finding its mark with silent, lethal precision. The ridge leveled out into a narrow ledge, hemmed in by rock and pine. "Here," Eli said, yanking the woman down behind a fallen log. The baby whimpered once before she pressed her cheek to his tiny head, murmuring soft words only the child could hear. The enemy came hard and fast, their boots pounding over the snow, their shouts sharp in a language Eli didn't know but didn't need to understand. Hatred sounded the same in any tongue. The first man appeared over the rise, rifle raised, and Eli dropped him before he could fire. The Lakota took the next, an arrow through the chest sending him sprawling backward into the white. But for each one that fell, another took his place. A bullet tore into the log near the woman's shoulder, splintering wood into her hair. Eli cursed under his breath, then met the Lakota's eyes. Without a word, the warrior understood. They had to end it now. Together they broke from cover, charging down the ridge with a yell that split the cold air. Eli's rifle kicked hard in his hands, the last round spent in quick, punishing shots. The Lakota's bow sang until the string frayed, then he drew his knife, meeting the last of them in a whirl of steel and fury. The sudden violence broke the enemy's will. Those still standing turned and ran into the trees, their forms swallowed by snow and shadow. Silence fell, broken only by the woman's ragged sob of relief. Eli bent over, hands on his knees, lungs burning, then crossed back to her. She looked up at him through wet lashes, the baby clutched tight. "It's over?" she asked. Eli glanced at the Lakota, who gave a single, slow nod. "For now," Eli said, his voice rough. "But this boy will need more than luck to grow into what he's meant to be." The Lakota stepped forward, laying a hand gently on the baby's head. "He will have it," he said. "My people will see to that." As the sun broke through the clouds, painting the ridge in gold, Eli stood beside them, feeling the weight of what they'd fought for. The woman wrapped the baby's blanket tighter, the same one Eli had first seen in her arms. Against all odds, it was still warm. and so was the life inside it. Together they started down the ridge, leaving the blood and shadows behind, walking toward whatever came next.